this is Jim Jensen with the Lucky 7 Ranch podcast. So I kind of maybe go back into some of my childhood and some of the reasons that we are where we are today. Back when I was 6 years old, I had my first job, first paying job. So I was putting money in my pocket at 6. I was on a full-time hand job at 8. By the time I was 14 years old, I had some money behind me. As I was growing up, I would get a heifer a month. That was my wages too. And so at a very early age, I took a lot of time. I spent hours and hours going through all the cows trying to find the best cow so I could get the best heifer calf, so I could start with the best. And so I did just exactly that. When it came to go out there and grab my calf after she got weaned, I had the very best ones. So I'd already had that eye and that want to be the very best in the industry. And then after I'd started building some cows, when I was about 14 years of age, my dad had a small bunch of registered cows, Hereford cows. This was all Hereford back in the day. Both he and I decided that we were going to buy the best Hereford bull we could, because we were just going to go out there and spend a lot of money. And I think at that point in time, it was like $4,000 each that we put into this hat. I was 14, and it was $4,000. For $4,000 back then, it's like $50,000 today. So that was a lot of money for a kid, 14-year-old kid, that, worked his guts out. And so we did just that. He went to Montana, and he bought the best bull money could buy. And it was one of the very top bulls that you could buy anywhere in the world. And we brought him home, and I mean, you want to talk about this gorgeous, beautiful, I mean, it was the real deal bull. And we turned him with the cows. We got back that fall, and he looked like an anorexic milk cow. He damn near starved to death. And when it got said and done, he dried up every cow, or none of them could produce any milk, and turned the good cows that we already had, and he ruined them all. And so as a 14-year-old kid, I was a little bit upset with the experience of buying the typical registered cow. Life always hands you, the trials and tribulations that we get handed, and you deal with it. But they're just education. And so it just educated me in how to do it a little different from there. Once you put bad genetics in your herd, the 20 years, 30 years, 40 years of genetics that you've already got in there, you can wipe them out really, really quickly, and that's just exactly what happened. So we didn't recover. To be real honest, I didn't ever recover from that event. And so then as I was older, ready to come back, so I had a professional rodeo career. I traveled with world champions. I lived with world champions. I was in the top 10 in the world at my event, saddle bronc riding in the PRCA. And at that point, there was a point where I knew it was time to come home and settle down. And about that time, I went out and decided to buy some more cows. And the opportunity I had was a dispersion of a big registered Angus herd. And so I went to that dispersion, and I bought these good cows. And lo and behold, within a week when I brought them home, and the cows hadn't even had a calf. They were bred cows. They didn't even have a calf yet. And the neighbor told me he'd buy the bulls for more than I paid, for like twice as much as I paid for each cow. So I was a young man at that point in time, but I wasn't dumb enough not to know that this is like, whoa, there's something here, I bought the cows just to turn them into commercial cows, but it's like, wow, if I can make 3 times as much money, let's go ahead and do that. But when I started that program, I go back to my roots, and my roots were getting beat up so bad on that bull that ruined those Hereford cows, because now we're going into Angus, and now I'm changing the whole entire program to the Angus herd. So understand, our family ranch started in 1895. My great-grandfather showed up from Denmark, and I think it was 7 horses and 3 cows the first winter he spent in a dugout, 40 below, 3 to 4 foot of snow, and every day his job was to shovel the snow off of the grass so that they could stay alive. And from that moment on, we were a Hereford breeder until I decided to change that. through what we started at that event. We actually had some Hereford heifers, and so there was pretty common in the industry to breed them to an Angus bull, just so they have calving, so that you could get the calf out much easier. So we had a few of those, and as we were trying to buy these calving bulls, I studied a lot about the industry, and I could absolutely tell that the Black Angus cattle were, bar none, far above everything else. If you're going to be the best, you got to start out with the best breed as well, right? And so I knew at that point in time that we had to go to Angus. And so when I went and was buying these cattle, I knew I was going to buy 100% Angus cattle. It was just kind of coincidence that it started with registered cows, and that's where I got my start, because I didn't intend to become a registered breeder or sell bulls. I intended to buy the very best cows and be the best. And when I found out there was an opportunity not only to help myself economically by going to the registered business, but the opportunity was there to help all of the neighbors. If I got beat up as bad as I did when I bought that bull, there's people all over the United States that's getting that same experience. And so what happens is, in the registered breed, these people feed all the corn in the world, and they get them just pig fat. And that makes them prettier. It's kind of like the guy goes to the blind man going to the fair, and the guy says, "Oh, that's the prettiest bull I've ever seen," and the blind man goes, "And look how fat he is," because that's what sells. Fat in cows makes them look way prettier. So these guys feed them way too much, and then they take them and put them in a chute, and they trim them up and they pretty them up. It's kind of like going in as a movie star and having this A-team pretty all up. And then they've already created bad feet and legs, so they go out there and they trim their toes and pretty them all out, and they give them the manicure and they give them all of that. And then they sell them to the rancher that'll never ever put them in that conditions ever in their life and expect they're going to work. And so the rancher puts them in the real world conditions, and it's the same thing. What do you think would happen to a movie star if they came to Boulder, Wyoming and tried to spend a day with me? It's the exact same thing that happens to these bulls. The Black Angus, of course, when we started, it was the calving ease that you were able to calve your first calf heifer a little better. But what the Angus breed really had that the rest of the world didn't is their maternal abilities were incredible. They had the performance. They could create weaning weights, yearling weights, and at the same time we could put beef on the plate that the consumers wanted to eat, which would be high quality, heavily marbled, really, really good steaks to eat. So the Angus cow absolutely put everything together, the best of any of them. So it was the cow that could do it all. Absolutely, it was the do-it-all cow. And there's no question, and that's why it's probably 75 to 80% of all cattle in the United States are Angus now, Black Angus, because they are the do-it-all cow. They're the ones that get it done from the time they hit the ground till the time it's going through the consumer on the other end. We had to put them to the test, because I knew that if I wasn't ever going to sell a bull to somebody else that couldn't handle their conditions and were going to fall apart like the bull I bought when I was 14, I knew that I now had to do it a different way. So I said, we're going to raise them in the real world conditions. And lo and behold, you have to understand as well, we live in Boulder, Wyoming, which is the nation's ice belt. It's the coldest place in the United States, and more than likely the toughest place in the United States to make a living raising cattle. So we are already in that area, and versus the typical people that are living in Corn Belt, where it's a lot warmer, it's a lot easier, and they have excessive feed. So we're already in an advantage. But then when I brought them there, I thought, well, if I do that, and then I also raise them tougher than every single person, right? So who do you want to compete with before you go to a competition? You want to compete with somebody better than you. You want to be up and above what the competition you're going to compete is. That's how you get better, and that's how you go to a competition, knowing you can win. So if I'm going to win in my venue, don't I have to put my cows in a tougher condition than anywhere they're going to go? And if they can prove that they can win at that level, and they can survive and they can do what they need to do at that level, doesn't it make sense that if I put them in a lesser competition, that they're going to just thrive? So that was my whole entire motive to do everything I did. How do I do it to where there's no way I can ever look somebody in the eye and say, hey, I failed you because I sent you a bull that couldn't handle your conditions. So remember when I understood all of that, we were still in the Hereford business. We were 5-generation Hereford breeders, so we were still in the Hereford business. When I'm going to the Angus, they had the exact same problems as the Hereford did. The one thing that they had that the rest of the breeds, it's not like they had it that the rest of the breeds didn't, that they were pronounced more, they just had it more so in their body. They could not live at high elevation. They would get right heart failure, which we at high elevation always call brisket disease. So their heart blows up. Their heart can't take it because of the lack of oxygen. There's not enough oxygen. The heart starts process, and we can go through that whole entire process. But what it does is that basically the heart is pumping so hard to try and get enough blood into the lungs that it can get enough oxygen for them to survive, because there's a lack of oxygen at high elevations. And that process literally goes to a point where they're pushing the blood out through the walls of the heart, and then all of a sudden their chest becomes enlarged, and they call it big brisket, and they will end up dying from it. And all of that blood is basically getting pushed out through the walls of the heart. So understand, they're in heart failure at that point. And we'd noticed that our whole entire lives, even with the Herefords, but it was pronounced in the Angus cattle. So what we did, what I did when I started this, is I knew that I had to fix that problem. So we were right at the top of the spectrum, and we started doing what is called a PAP test, pulmonary arterial pressure testing, which is a test that you take actually a catheter and you stick it through the vein in the neck, and you go all the way through the heart, clear out to the other side, and we take pressures. And with that test, we're able to find the cattle that have that probability. And so we're the #1 program in the world for that, and we basically eliminated those problems, and so that's something that we've done. So people want to know what the Da Vinci is. So the Da Vinci is not the typical Angus, because what's happened is we've made it to where it can survive at high elevations. The survivability is much better, the feed efficiency is much better, the longevity is much better. All of these things are much better. So one might ask, where did you get this mission? Where did you come from? So I have to say, and I've told people before, that I think God was showing me these things even before I accepted Jesus Christ and I knew Him. So faith-based, what I can tell you, it's a lot easier to live faith-based than faith without faith. And so after I got the faith, it just escalated. But I knew that I was building this prior to that. So I would have to say that if you looked at what Jacob did in the Bible, I believe that God was showing me and demonstrating all the way through how to do this. And so what we were creating were these Da Vinci cattle unbeknownst. I was getting an idea, how do we put them in a survival of the fittest mode so we can create animals that are just absolutely stronger? And then how do we become the #1 program in the world for high elevation, which now is helping at low elevation for right heart failure? How do we become the #1 feed efficiency program in the world? How are we able to offer the nation's only 4-year guarantee on bulls, which is durability? So the bulls, cows, everything, they live longer, they live healthier, they live a better life than a normal animal because they're healthier and they live longer. And then they're feed efficient, and they're everything about them is just totally different than the rest of the Angus cattle out there. But through faith-based drove us into there. We became the #1 program in the world PAP testing because we live above 7,000 feet. That's life to us. It's not like the rest of the breeders where they come in there and they decide just to sell a bull, they'll go ahead and do this phony test, and most of them are doing just that. This is life to us. We understand it, so we're going to do it right. And we do just that. And then we got into the feed efficiency because we knew that feed efficiency would be the number one trait, the low-hanging fruit. 70% of the cost of doing business at a ranch is through feed or feed associated costs. So if you're going to change your economic venue, where do you think you ought to start? And when we were running our cows prior to purchasing the Grow Safe feed efficiency test system, we were running them in survival of the fittest, which when we did that, we eliminated the inefficient cows. So what cows do you think are going to leave first? The ones that can't convert feed. And so that already happened prior to me even knowing we were trying to do feed efficiency. There's where I say the faith come in there. I believe God had his hand on this before I did it. We eliminated 70% of the inefficient cattle prior to me even know what feed efficiency was. And then, and I can't remember what it was, 18 years ago or something like that, we purchased the nation's only, it was the only individually owned, and it was called at that time Grow Safe Feed Efficiency Test System, which we could absolutely scientifically calculate every bite of feed an animal ate. So we can now absolutely scientifically prove the amount of feed they eat versus the amount of gain they have. So this isn't just a guess like a lot of people are doing. This is absolutely scientific. Today we're moved to the RIC2 Discover system because it's 10 times better than any other system out there. Now we're the only individual in the United States to own that. We're taking this stuff serious. We're not like the rest of the world that just goes out there and says, oh, we have this and we have this and we have this. We're putting a lot of money and a lot of effort into doing just what we're doing. Well, when you buy a bull, you're probably 2 years away before you really have any data off of what his offspring does. That's when you get the very, very tiny spot. So when you buy a bull, 2 years before you know hardly anything about what that bull's genetics are going to actually do. And more than likely, by the time you start to be able to evaluate the cows, that's usually a 5 to 7 year cycle. So you think about the bull you buy today, you're probably not going to really know how good he really was until at least 7 years. And at 7 years, you still don't know how good he is. You just got a lot more data at 7 years. And to put this in perspective, Jeff Bezos is investing, I think, about $40 million to create cows that can eat less. He is putting it into associations and universities, which will never ever get it done. But he is right now 15 years away from actually being able to change this. And he's doing it for an environmental perspective, so they'll create less greenhouse emissions, right? He's 15 years away from being able to actually say he accomplished anything because of the cattle cycle. Not only that, but we know for a fact, because we know that his goals and their parts are, where their goals are, where they want to head. Their goals are below what we're currently at right now. So think about this. One of the wealthiest men in the world is investing $40 million to try and fix things that we're already past where he's already going to be. And if he can get it done, which I don't think he can, I don't think it's possible, I don't think the people he's got to do it will ever get it done. Minimum 15 years to get to a point where we're at. Probably can't ever get there. Or he could start and he could already have reached his goals today. He could, with one phone call, he could get there right now. We're already past what his goals are. So basically, we've outkicked our coverage. If you're looking in football terms, when you're punting the football, we outkicked our coverage already. He's not even close. He underkicked the coverage. He basically put his money in there, and he's going to shank one off to the side 20-yard punt, and we're over there overkicking our coverage. So it's an interesting thing as we were looking at some statistics about what is a good bull. The one thing that stuck out to me on a good bull is this article basically said it had to be semen tested, it had to be proven to be a breeder, and it had to be registered with some numbers. If that's the case, to be a bull and justify how much you can pay for one, what if that bull never breeds a cow? You don't know if he's ever going to breed a cow. Just because he's got potentially a breeder doesn't mean he's going to bring one. What if he breaks a leg? What if that happens? What if this happens? What if he breeds 5 cows? Well, pretty quick you have too much money in him. That bull will never pay himself off. That bull needs to breed 100 head of cows or more in order for him to be a good bull. And he still needs to do the other things, economic things as well. Today's industry, the bulls are breeding 25 to 30 cows. That means if you're paying $15,000 for a bull in today's world, you almost have $750 into that bull prior, or not, $750 per head into every calf out of that bull before he sucks a tit. There's no way you will ever get that money back. There's nobody that has a 4-year guarantee but us. We have a 4-year guarantee, so typically with that 4-year guarantee, you should get a minimum of 100 head of calves. That could be, in and of itself, at least $750 advantage with the high price bulls that we have today. And that's before he sucks a tit. Has nothing to do with anything later. And there's no way that you're going to get that $750 back. You got the 44 Farms, the Walmart project, promising all of these big returns. Well, they're not giving you the big returns, number one. They're basically saying if you lose $130 by not putting an implant in them, then we'll give you a $25 deal. So you only have to lose $105. That's if you buy my $15,000 bull and you lose $750 prior to that. It's a Ponzi scheme. If you're getting 10 calves out of a cow, then that's one thing. But you're looking at a bull that should breed over 100. So now you've times 10 the value of that bull. What does that bull give you and what does he not do is times 10 over what the cow is. That's why the bulls cost so much more than the cows right now. It's because the cow is going to give you 7 to 10 calves. That bull should give you 100 to 125. The problem in today's world is the typical bull, and I don't care what breed it is breeding 25 to 30 head of cows before he's done. And if you've got $15,000 into him, even $10,000, and let's put it in layman's terms, last fall, the average bull averaged $11,265. And if you get 25 to 30 calves, you're into that calf for $400 to $500 before he sucks a tit. There's no way, the economic way, he's going to pay that bill off from the promises that they're making you that they're, you know, that we're going to buy your animals, which they never have. They will never do that. That's a lie. They say they're going to give you a premium, but it's a lie. They don't ever give you a premium. The Lucky 7 Angus cattle still outsell them everywhere we go. They're not giving you a premium because if they were, then we wouldn't be outselling them. But you can't get that back, you know. And they're basically telling you, I'm going to give you 5 cents a pound. So let's put it in layman's terms. If a calf weighs 500 pounds and you give 5 cents a pound, he's going to give you $25 premium, which they don't. But that's if you have $400 more into that bull per calf before he sucks a tit. Or more. And not only that, but if you go to the 44 Farms program, they say you can't even put an implant in them. And if you put an implant into a calf, that's worth 30 pounds. And at today's rate, that 30-pound calf, or that 30 pounds is worth about $5 to $6 a pound. So somewhere between $150 and $180 is what that implant will give you more than if you don't. And they're going to give you $25 to lose $150 to $180. And you're going to lose another $400 because of that. And that's not even the bottom line, because now every cow on your place is ruined. The people that buy those bulls right now, they tell me, we do it because we want to get that premium, which is stupid. But they say we put it with our old beat up dairy cow, our old milk cow, because he's so bad I don't want to ruin my other cows. The cows won't live, the cows don't produce, they don't work on the ranch. They're not real cows, they need to live in a glass bubble, they don't need to live on a ranch. And so it's the craziest thing I've ever heard. Because I can tell you, I have customer after customers that have chosen those bulls. And I can go to them, I can go to Gardeners, I can go to Riverbend, I can go to 44 Farms, I can go to the people that and those are the programs that basically they're often premiums, which they haven't given because we still outsell them at the sale barn anyway. So they're not giving a premium anyway. But I can tell you right now that those guys say, we buy them just so they'll buy our calves. We'll buy one bull from them because we don't want any of the rest of our cows bred to them because it will ruin the cows that we have. You remember when we were talking earlier about that bull that ruined my cows and basically I couldn't get back out of it? That's what is happening. You put those kind of cattle on there and they ruin their cows and they can never get them to where they'll be able to go out and make a living on their ranch again. That genetic base is broken. It's really tough. I mean, I feel bad about it, you know, and I can tell you right now the reason I feel so bad about it is right now in the industry, we have the highest beef prices that we've ever had. People in the ranching industry are making a lot of money. The reason that is happening is because of supply demand. We have a shortage of supply. Why do we have a shortage of supply? We don't have enough cows. They would like you to think it was drought and it was other reasons. But I can tell you that's false, and I can tell you why. The reason I can prove that that's false is because in the last 10 years, the Lucky 7 Angus people straight across the board have increased the number of cows they've produced by 15%, where everybody else in the industry has decreased by 25%. So to put this in layman's terms, the Lucky 7 Angus cattlemen right now are selling 115% of the amount of cattle that they used to in record times. They're making money. You know, they have tax problems. Versus the other people that, yeah, we have record times, but they only have 75% of the amount of cattle they had. So they're not hardly making any more than they did before. So why did our people in the same geographic regions increase their cattle when everybody else decreased them? There's only one way to explain that. It's all economics. Those cows weren't making them a living. Those cows weren't lasting long enough to make a living. They weren't doing the things that was necessary to make a living. Why did our people increase? You can't increase unless you're making money. You can only increase when you're making money. You don't increase when you're losing money. You increase when you're making money. Pretty simple math. But what's actually happened in the industry is most of the people that are breeding bulls never made a living. So you can see right now, I'm in a drug rug and I'm in some shitty pants. I work every single day on this ranch. I do every single job on this ranch. I have the blood, sweat, and tears. I have the broken bones. I have the heartaches. I have the 40 below where you can't feel your fingers and toes. I have all of that. Most of the people that are breeding these bulls came from a college education, never spent a day on the ranch, but they know how to sell and they know how to emotionally cheat the folks into thinking that if they give him all of these cool numbers and all these cool data sets, which they're capable of doing on their computers, that will just alone make these cattle better. And it's kind of like, okay, so I'm going to go get this guy on paper to go play a professional football game. He's never played a down in his life. He's a big fat kid, never ever done anything in his life. He weighs 400 pounds. Because he's 400 pounds and he's 6'4", he didn't have to play, or he didn't have to work out, he didn't have to do nothing. I'm going to stick him in an NFL game and you're going to go out there and try and make a living. That's exactly what they're doing. They're basically taking this kid that's never got off the couch, that weighs 400 pounds, 6'4" and 400 pounds, and saying, okay, now I want you to go up against the biggest beast in the world that spent his whole entire life working out and studying and doing all of that. How do you think it's going to go? That's exactly what's happening in the industry. If you're tired of the bulls that don't hold up, the bulls that have bad feet, the bulls that are not, you know, your cow's not getting bred up, the cow's not lasting 9 to 10 years. If you're tired of all of those problems that are happening when you go out there and find that bull and it looks like an anorexic milk cow, all of those things, you can head over to the Lucky 7 Ranch. You can look at our history. You can look at the data. You can look at the statistics. What we've done is we've changed the engine. The engine in those cows and the way they're developed will fix all of these problems. We have decades experience of doing that. They're called Da Vinci cattle because even though they're Angus, even though they do every single thing to fit in the box for the feedlot and the packers and the rancher, they do things that none of the rest of them do. They live longer, they're healthier, they breed up better. And so if you want to come to us, join the revolution and come to Lucky 7 Angus. The one thing that's happened in the industry is they've come up with EPDs, and so what the EPDs have done is basically said we can tell which cattle make more weaning weights, yearling weights, which at one point in time that was a very good benefit when they were actually doing factual scientific shoot measurements. Today they're actually using DNA, and I can absolutely prove to you the DNA is not doing what it's supposed to do. But the theory that you can produce more weaning weights and more yearling weights, more pounds on your ranch is absolutely flawed, because it goes down to the theory of energy transferred. So if you don't change the way that energy is transferred, you can make more pounds, you just have to have more energy, right? The other side of that is if you try to get a bigger calf, the only way in today's world you can do that is through getting bigger cows. And what I can say is Shaquille O'Neal's daughter was 6'1" and could slam dunk a basketball in 8th grade. What's the chance she became a moderate framed woman when she grew up? So what the theory that everybody says is that we can have this extreme weaning weight and still have moderate framed cow. There's no way that can happen. That goes completely and totally against the theories, any scientific research. It can't happen. If you want a bigger weaning weight, you're going to get bigger cows. Thus, when you got bigger cows, you have to feed them more. So now you're not getting any more pounds of beef on your ranch. Feed efficiency is the only way you can get more pounds of beef. You don't have to increase your weaning weight. You increase the number of cows. So if you increase your cow herd from, let's say, 100 to 140, and you have the exact same pounds or exact same weaning weight, you've still increased your net profit by 40%. It's not about weaning weights, it's about pounds of beef per ranch. Everybody in this world needs to start figuring out pounds of beef produced per ranch. That's the bottom line. It's a trap when you get into the weaning weight, because at some point in time you're going to get cows that are too big, that will never breed up, that don't last as long, they fall apart, and pretty quick you got cows that at 3 years old you have to get rid of them. They're not getting bred up. And maybe you're weaning some bigger calves, but you're not going to wean as many pounds of beef when you get to this. And you'll get to a point where you have to sell all those cows and start over, because they're going to make mongrel cattle that will not fit in the box. And that's what's going on today, because the price of beef is so high, everybody wants bigger cattle to increase the pounds per calf. We're always thinking about it wrong. It's pounds of beef per ranch, not dollars per calf. You've got to change your mindset or you'll never be successful in this business. Once you get to the Lucky 7 Angus catalog, the one thing that you're going to find out is, and I get this question all the time, I want to see your catalog because I want to see your genetics. And so I look at everybody and I said, what do you mean see my genetic? If I'm telling you I've completely and totally changed the breed and I've made the Da Vinci cow, do you think if you're going to come to my catalog you're going to see the same exact genetics that you would find in everybody else's catalog? If that was the case, I would be a bold-faced liar. You're not going to see the same genetics. And then when you go to feed efficiency, we are the #1 feed efficiency program in the world, bar none. I've been on speaking tours all over the United States. I know everybody that claims to have feed efficiency. I study them, I understand them. They don't know what they're doing. The rest of the world doesn't know what they're doing. They're not going in the right direction. So when you try and figure out what is feed efficiency, it's really, really difficult to find out. And so some people are asking me, how do I determine feed efficiency? So in our catalog, we have absolutely given you a feed efficiency score, and it'll be explained in the catalog. But what we do is we go through the 4 legs of a pedigree, which would be the mom, dad, and both of their moms and dads. So the grandparents of the whole entire pedigree through the pedigree, and we judge them on what they were feed efficient according to our data, along with individual data, and we come up with a score to where it makes it way easier for you to understand. Because to the naked eye, and I know this because I go to every single person that does feed efficiency testing, and not one of them knows what the heck they're doing. Not one of them. And so there is no numbers that you're going to be able to understand until you've been in the experience like we have. So we absolutely put together a score that will help you. And I'm quite comfortable that that's the best data that I can give you at this time that you're capable of understanding and digesting to help you buy a bull at our sale in our catalog. So the reason we've started this podcast is that I found in my life so many people are miseducated in the cattle industry. They're listening to the people at the universities. They're listening to the people in the associations. They're listening to the articles written in the cattle journals and the cattle catalogs, and all of them are preaching the exact same thing. Not one of them is able to preach the facts of what makes you a living in the cattle business, because almost every one of them people that are writing those are coming up with the facts. None of them have ever made a business they've never ever made a penny in your lane. Matter of fact, it would be quite the opposite. I think most of them probably went broke trying to do what you do. So they're lesser of you and they're trying to tell you what to do. The difference that we have is we have firsthand knowledge in the commercial industry, in the toughest place in the world to try and make a living. We've increased the cow numbers on our ranch from 300 head to 2,300 head. We've been extremely successful. Now we're in the registered seed stock industry, the breeding business, the genetic business. We understand the genetic business. And we, as we're going forward, we're seeing all of these lies, all these misconceptions, and all of the stuff that you have been told. And we want to set the record straight. What we appreciate is the fact that we have made a lot of our customers very healthy. They're doing extremely well. And we want the whole entire world to understand that there's a better way to do all of this, and that's just exactly what we're trying to do. The one thing I'll say is that I was on record 20 years ago. This isn't just something that I just started. I was on record 20 years ago in a newspaper, and the article started out, and it says, Jim is looking out the window, and he looks, and he says, I may be the most hated man in the seed stock industry. He winces and then he comes back and he says, and if I'm not, I should be. That was my goal 20 years ago. I haven't changed it. I've been very voiceful the whole entire time. And I'm going to, now that we have a better way to educate, we're going to educate the people of why the seed stock industry, the newspapers, the universities, everybody in those areas are misleading you in how to make money. And that is proven by what our customers are doing today versus the rest of them. Just yesterday, I had a man call me up and he said, I want to know how to get some of your genetics. He says, I went broke. I lost my cow herd trying to do it before because I had the wrong genetics. I looked at your neighbor, his name is Jake Estevold up in North Dakota, and he said he is kicking butt and taking names and doing exactly what I wanted to do. And the only difference between what he did and what I'm doing is he was using Lucky 7 Angus. And he says, I want to start with Lucky 7 Angus so I don't go broke next time. That's exactly what's happened to the industry, guys. I'm not making it up. Follow along the journey. Lucky 7 Angus. We may not be pretty, but we're effective.